It is Friday, June 7th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another Summer Game Fest episode of LTPS. Today is Summer Games Fest. That's going to happen later in the day, so obviously we can't talk about that now because I film these Thursday nights going into Friday morning, so it is something where we might have a separate conversation later in the evening based on what does or does not show up there, because we are expecting Sony to be there with something, which we will talk about later in this show. But for now, we still have plenty of other PS news stories to go over, so let's begin, as always, with our PS Plus reminder. The June PS Plus Essential lineup live on PSN now, so you can go ahead and claim those games, and also the bonus PS VR2 games as part of the Days of Play promotion for PS Plus Premium members is now live on PSN as well. And for our first very quick little PSA news story, August 1st is the confirmed release date for the Tomba Special Edition, which we saw confirmed not too long ago, and it was super cool to see that game come back. It's such a quintessential OG PS1 game, which physically it's a little bit expensive. Or you could just buy the PS1 Classic on PS3 if it's still available on there. I know some PS1 games are starting to get delisted on that storefront, but either way, it's so cool to have this game come back via limited run and their Carbon engine, and that's more noteworthy because a friend of the show, MVG, Modern Vintage Gamer, is the lead developer on that project, which is so cool for him. Congrats on the confirmed date and, you know, being a part of such a rich, valuable IP that means a lot to PlayStation. So it's cool to see Tomba come back, and so August 1st, you can look forward to that game. Moving on to our next news story, let's talk about Concord, Firewalk's PvP first-person hero shooter that was shown off during the most recent State of Play. The pre-orders are now live for this game, so that means we now know what it's going to cost, which it is going to cost something. We did know that because the game is going to require a PS Plus membership. So the base price is $40. That's going to be for a physical copy or also available on PSN, and there is going to be a digital deluxe edition for $60. That's going to include 72 hours of early access, also 16 character skins, and a Monarch pack, and then the final game is going to have 16 playable free gunners, 12 unique maps, and 6 team-based game modes. And that's all going to expand and change after launch with regular updates, which are going to be free for all players. So that sounds very similar to Helldivers 2, which I'm curious as to how much Helldivers 2 did or did not influence the roadmap for this game and how they were planning on monetizing it, that being that there is a premium upfront cost, but one that is a lot more accessible, I feel, especially given that, you know, in the case of Helldivers 2, there was hardly any buzz going into that game, but once people played it, realized it was a really fun gameplay loop and it was enjoyable and there was a lot of content there immediately. You know, being able to tell other people, hey, it's only $40, right? That lowers that barrier of entry, right? So there's less friction on getting more players in. So maybe that is something where Sony's just planning on, well, hoping that the same thing happens here. The difference with Concord, obviously, is that, you know, there's negative buzz going into it because the game has seen a lot of criticism so far for being very bland looking, derivative. You know, where have we seen this before? This game is like 5 years too late when hero shooters were already coming out and, you know, they were generating all this positive buzz and people were playing them left and right. And also there is the expectation that hero shooters are free to play right off the bat. So I think for some people were thinking like, oh, this game better be free to play, otherwise there's no way I'm playing. It doesn't matter what the price is. You know, I'm still kind of in the same spot, which is, for me, I mean, yeah, I'm checked out, right? Like, I was really hoping this was something similar to a Killzone or a Resistance, which is, it's not a hero shooter, but it's some kind of more grounded first-person shooter experience that maybe has a larger battlefield of player counts, so that could be up to, you know, 16, 24 players. I don't know, like, in my head, I was just thinking it was maybe something like that, but maybe that was just wishful thinking. Either way, I'm more or less checked out of the game, but of course, following the PlayStation business, I still want to see where the game does go. You know, surely there's some kind of gameplay loop here that Sony believes in. We have to remember, not only did they sign this game on, but there was enough there, and maybe this was more of an opportunity thing where they could work this out, but they then acquired the studio to further bring them in-house and fund the project and see it all the way through. There's something here that has to be enjoyable, at least in the eyes of Sony. I mean, they're quite good at, you know, being this sort of talent-seeking business. That's historically what PlayStation has always done. So Not to say that they've always got winners, but they're very good at that. And they've also been a lot more stringent lately with their portfolio, right? They have canceled a number of games in recent years. So I'm just so curious as to what is there for this game foundationally. So once the beta arrives, we'll see just how well this game really does, and we'll see if it gets the same kind of word-of-mouth treatment, perhaps a big U-turn, just like we saw with Helldivers 2. Now, moving on to a game I can absolutely get down with, and that is Astro Bot, because we got more details on this game. Actually, this story is a little bit old because it came out after LTPS last Friday, but we just had to mention this, which is the studio head, Nicolas Duché, was speaking with Entertainment Weekly, and he did confirm this is the studio's biggest game so far. So Nicolas was quoted saying, "This is really about going up one notch, really several notches, and having Astro's big story. We call it Astro Bot because we treat this as a new beginning. That's a really, really big game. I think for us that's the biggest game we've ever made." Nick goes on to explain the synopsis, and that's about Astro's dual speeder spaceship, which looks like a DualSense, that somehow gets damaged, and so all the pieces get scattered across the universe, so Astro has to go find them all while saving iconic PlayStation characters, which we do know from the PS Store listing that there's now over 150 of them, which is a lot more than what we saw from Astro's Playroom, which I love. I'm so into how they're doubling down on tying in PlayStation hardware, PlayStation history, PlayStation characters, doing more than 150. Like, great, now we can get really obscure, like let's do certain characters that maybe a lot of people are not going to recognize. I just think that's, I love it so much. And also hearing from Nick that this is kind of a new beginning for the franchise, that's very much what this reads to me, because as we've said before, this is Astro's first real shot at costing money to a wide audience, because as we've seen prior, it was, this IP has always been reserved to more experimental things, that being PSVR with Rescue Mission, or really the PS4 camera with the Playroom on PS4 launch day. So, having Astro's Playroom baked into every PS5 console is great. That means there's a lot of exposure for this IP, but now this is the real test, and I truly hope it does really well. I will say, as far as them, saying, oh, this is our biggest game so far, in fairness, the Playroom is like an hour of content. Astro's Playroom is like 5 hours. Rescue Mission is like 12 to 15 hours. You can spend a decent amount of time with that game, but this to me sounds like, okay, we're pushing definitely more than 15 hours, maybe upwards of 20 plus, which, mind you, a platformer, I think you don't really want it to be that long anyway. You don't want to have like a 50-something hour platformer, so I think 20 plus hours is a really good benchmark for this game, and everything I'm hearing so far, I'm so into it. Now, something else we can also mention for Astro Bot going into our next news story is the pre-order details for the game as well, because that goes live today, and we now know the game is going to cost $60 USD, so not quite a full 70. Sounds like Sony's maybe trying to position the game in a similar fashion to Sackboy Big Adventure, where that on PS5 day one was also 60, so not bad. I was hoping for something closer to 50, but 60 I think is pretty good as well. And if you do decide to pre-order the game, then you are going to get some bonuses as well. So for the standard physical and standard digital, you'll get access to the Parappa Lovestruck outfit, 2 Astro avatars, and a graffiti skin for the dual speeder. Now, if you do opt for the physical version, you also get a physical poster as well, which looks unbelievably cool. Honestly amazing. I love this so much. It looks great. I just hope it's... Well, you would assume it's an insert, I think, because that's usually how that's done, which means there's going to be creases on it, so that kind of ruins the whole thing. But the Digital Deluxe Edition, so that comes with 3 dual speeder skins, more avatars, the soundtrack, and a digital art gallery, and also 2 more outfits, one being a golden Astro, and then one being the Yarnum Hunter, which these are all early unlocks, by the way, so they're not gated behind the pre-orders, so you can still unlock these naturally. But yeah, that's what's going on with the pre-orders for this game, which... Yeah, it really, for me, it's the poster. I think that's awesome. I really hope it's something where, like, separate stores get them, and if you buy it online, they'll ship it in a tube, so that way you can, like, properly frame it or something. Like, that's how I would want to use it. It is always cool, like, back in the day, like, a lot of PS2 games would come with, like, posters, but, obviously they're creased and folded, so... And I had a room back then, like a lot of you probably remember a long time ago on the channel, where the roof line was right next to my head. Like I would have so many game posters up there, and they were all from like PS2 and PSP games. And it was cool, but like, I don't know, you grow older and you kind of don't want to do that. You would rather like get it flat and framed, and it looks much nicer that way. So that's maybe my only little caveat, but otherwise I will say, yeah, price is good. I mean, I would have hoped for like 50, if only because I genuinely want this game to do well, like very well. So I want the barrier of entry to be as low as possible, but at least it's not 70, because even though I would have paid for that, and I'm sure a lot of you probably would have too if you get really excited about this kind of stuff, most others might not be willing to do that for this kind of game. So I would want it to be as low as possible. 60, I think, is a very good compromise. Next up, we have a rumor that is probably going to be outdated very soon based on how this is expected to play out, but the LEGO Horizon Adventures game is going to be announced at Summer Games Fest, which, if you're watching this right away, then that means we only have to wait about 7-8 hours until it actually does get announced. So we've had a lot of recent rumblings that is what's going to happen. I know the Kurakasa's Twitter account mentioned this just outright when somebody asked what Sony is going to have there. They said LEGO Horizon Adventures. Shinobi602 over on Reset Era mentioned on the PS Studios OT that the press have bookings over the weekend to see some kind of unannounced title. I would assume that's what they're referring to. Bilbo-kun also reports that the title will be there as well, which they actually claimed very recently. The game is going to be a PS5 and PC day and date launch title, with pre-orders going live that day as well. So it should be something where in mere hours we'll know a lot about this game, what it looks like, when it's coming out, because Sony doesn't usually accept pre-orders until they know when the game actually is coming out, so like a confirmed date. So we'll know when it's coming out, we'll know the price, we'll have pre-order info, we'll know who's making the game, which I'm so curious as to who's actually making it. I'm not sure there's much we can really say because, again, we're going to like find out what it is very soon. The only like caveat here being that like, oh, that was not at State of Play, so it's like, oh, it'll probably show up here, but how much of it are we going to see? Well, now at least we're understanding that maybe this is going to be, they're going to have this thing ready to go within, it sounds like it might even ship within this fiscal year, which, it's not like a planned major sequel, and I'm not sure what the sales expectation is for this game, but it sounds like it might ship this fiscal year, which also day and date PC is interesting. Maybe not too alarming given that we know this is something where maybe it's the licensing requirement, that being Lego, or the fees are just really high and there's more upside doing it day and date on PC. Plus Lego games always have co-op multiplayer, so maybe there's crossplay involved as well. So enough speculation, we'll just leave it there because we'll probably find out what this game is very soon, and depending on what there is to say about it, we might have a separate upload going over what the game actually is. I'll actually try and film myself watching the presentation later, and if I can catch my genuine reaction to it, then maybe we'll do something like that. Now, getting into another rumor here, this one coming from, again, Bilbo-kun writing for Deal Labs, where they put out this report about The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered's PC version, where they claim Naughty Dog actually finished this back in November 2023, and now Sony is simply sitting on this game, waiting for a good time to release it, which the running theory and speculation there is that they're maybe waiting for Season 2 of The Last of Us HBO to start airing, so that they can then ship it and look for that sort of uplift that these IP typically see with all these adaptations airing on their respective services, which does make sense, but Sony typically does not do that. I mean, they've never really been known to sit on games, at least not for a long time, and that goes for first party, second party, remasters, ports, sequels, new IP. Like if they know the team is wrapping up that game and there's a release window that they can pin down, like they'll pick a date and they'll ship the game, and they'll do that even when projects are right next to each other. We just had Rise of the Ronin and Stellar Blade as an external studio example. Internally, we had, in recent years, that would have been the Last of Us Part 2 and also Tsushima, again, releasing very close to each other. So Sony is not known to do that. Nintendo, on the other hand, it's well documented that they do that. There's still a rumor that they're sitting on a Twilight Princess Switch game that they just have not done anything with for over a year. Like, they do that, and I guess we're supposed to be seeing that game fairly soon, let's hope. But yeah, Sony's not known to do that, so I'm wondering if they're more motivated this time around with like under the context of, oh, we have the HBO show, so let's wait until it is closer to that. Although one could argue, why would they not wait for the PS5 version as well, which came out January of this year? So I don't know. I mean, there is a lot of upside. I mean, the thing is, though, it really doesn't matter, because if you ship it now, you're still going to see that like triple-digit percentage growth for the week the game comes, or for the week the show airs, and then the game starts selling a lot better. Like, that's just how we've seen this go. So I don't know if you necessarily have to ship it right next to the show. You could just release it and then enjoy the sales the entire way through. So I'd be curious to find out if that actually is what's happening. Not to say the report is like unequivocally false, but based on how Bill Kun usually gets info, I'd be curious to know how they're coming to this conclusion, and why Sony would be doing it for this particular game. In other Naughty Dog news, we can also go over this recent piece from the LA Times, where Neil Druckmann was the featured creator on the LA Influential, where they go over his history at the studio, how the IP came to be for The Last of Us, just briefly going over that stuff. But the real headlines came from the bottom of the piece, where Neil does provide a quote here where he says, "I promise you, we will not be The Last of Us studio forever." He says multiple games are in the works, including multiple single-player projects. And I find this a bit funny, if only because I get what he's saying, but to me, I still think of Naughty Dog as a studio that spent a lot of time releasing multiple Crash Bandicoots, multiple Jak and Daxters, many Uncharted games, right? Like, that still, in my mind, like, supersedes their more recent work, which is only 2 Last of Us games. Obviously, it's been 10 years, and there's remasters and ports in between, but I don't know, in my head, I still think of Naughty Dog in a more broader sense of all these other games that they've done, and there's more games that they've done in those other IP versus this one. But having said that, I think the thing to take away from this quote is that it's another example of them trying to nudge the audience in the direction of, hey, we are doing a new IP first, and then The Last of Us is coming after that. That's how I'm reading this whole thing, right? We've had so many little things pop up recently with Neil talking about this stuff, and it just seems more and more clear that, Part 3 is maybe in a very early conceptual stage. I mean, you've probably got very few people that are sort of, in a writer's room trying to figure out what that game is going to be. But the sort of full steam ahead project is a brand new property. And we also have to bear in mind Naughty Dog's a very big studio. They've got multiple game directors. The other little offshoot we can mention is that we're suspecting that they're also overseeing or playing a co-development role with PlayStation Studios Visual Arts for a brand new Uncharted game as well. So, I don't want to sit here and break down the entire studio hierarchy, and say that's for sure what's going on. But they've got a lot of directors. They're doing many things. And it just seems more and more obvious that, hey, this is what we're doing. The new IP is first, and then more Last of Us is further away, which that's the roadmap I want. I love The Last of Us a lot, but I am ready for a new property out of Naughty Dog first, and I think that is indeed what we're getting. Next up, we have a peculiar situation going on with PlayStation 5's retail box art, where since launch, every single console sold has always had this big, bright yellow 8K logo in the top right corner, right next to the 4K 120 and HDR one, and now it would appear Sony is getting rid of that logo. This was initially spotted by, I believe, John Linneman of Digital Foundry, and then various other sites started talking about this and publishing it as a story, but it does appear to be gone. It's not there on PlayStation Direct either, so it sounds like Sony's finally being a bit more truthful in terms of what PS5 can actually do, which this is something where we can go back to PS5's launch right before the console came out on the PS blog as part of the PS5 FAQ. They did mention that PS5 can support a 8K output, and they'll enable this down the road with a firmware update once more 8K content becomes available, which surely did not happen because there really is no 8K content. And this even goes back to around that time, I said it, many others said it, we were all thinking this, which was, okay, whatever, that's not going to be a thing, because this is a prime example of a big multi-billion-dollar company just slapping something on the box because they can, and it looks nice, it looks fancy, and it looks like the console is future-proofed. But in a way, most people understood realistically that they're either not going to have the TV, or there's going to be nothing to watch or nothing to play. And that has very much been the case this entire way through. The one example we do have for a game is The Tourist, where that game has an internal res of 8K, but it's an internal resolution. So it actually downsamples to 4K because, as we just said, PS5 still to this day does not actually output 8K properly. So yeah, the company's probably just doing something where, and there's no doubt in my mind this is what's happening. They're getting rid of it on this console to put it on the PS5 Pro box. There's no doubt in my mind that's what's happening, especially given the dev materials internally does say that, you know, part of what they would like to see happen is 8K resolution at 30 frames per second. Which even that, for PS5 Pro, knowing what we know about that console, the spec sheet, even PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, that's not going to happen either. It's still not going to happen with that console. I would venture a guess. Maybe we'll see certain modestly approached games in the art style, visual department, whatever the case is. Maybe they will do it more frequently, kind of like The Tourist, and then that'll be an example where, you know, a game like The Tourist can properly output it to the full proper 8K resolution. I don't really know. I mean, even if that was the case, it's going to be a very small selection of software. So really the upside to PS5 Pro, as we said, is near 4K image qualities with high frame rates. So yeah, that to me seems like what's happening here, taking it off this console to then throw it on the Pro, if they do intend on actually having some kind of 8K support at that time, which I will say, I mean, the company probably was a bit more bullish back then about how much 8K content we would have in 4 years, and not even so much games, right? Strictly like static experiences, TV and film, like that alone would be enough to put it on the box and justify it and get around any sort of, you know, false advertising accusations. Because I know some are already kind of going there, right, of like, oh, we've got a class action on our hands, which I'm not a consumer rights lawyer. I don't know if that's actually the case, even though it does seem very misleading and very much false advertising right now. But, you know, I think the company probably did expect we would have more 8K experiences at this point. So not to sort of excuse them of any wrongdoing here. It certainly was misleading, but at least we all knew even 4 years ago, like, yeah, right, like that's not a thing, because 4 years on, even with a Pro coming up, 8K is just not a thing, and if it ever is going to be a thing, probably going to be quite a bit further out, I guess we could say. Moving on to our next news story. If you remember from last week's episode, we talked about how Sony registered a PSVR2 PC adapter in Korea, which was good news because that meant, okay, this thing's probably coming fairly soon. And, well, we did not have to wait long at all because they already confirmed it on the PlayStation blog. So the PSVR2 PC adapter is coming August 7th. It's going to cost $59.99 USD, €59.99 Euro, or £49.99 sterling, available at select retailers or PlayStation Direct. Sony also put up some recommended spec sheets for playing PSVR2 on PC, and you'll also need a 1.4 DisplayPort with the cable as well, which is not included with this adapter, and you'll also need a new PSVR2 application that Sony is going to release, and that's going to let you set up the headset by mapping out your play area. You'll also need the Steam VR app as well, which from there you can then buy and play all VR games. There's really no restrictions outside of just games properly being supported. And the only caveat here is that HDR, headset feedback, eye tracking, adaptive triggers, and haptic feedback other than rumble is not going to be available when playing on PC, which Sony does give some kind of answer here that PSVR2 is only made for PlayStation 5, and so those are the compromises for the time being, but that's what we know right now. And with all that in mind, a few things. I initially saw this news from a third-party source, and they put up the image that Sony put out. When I initially saw this, I thought to myself, oh, okay, that site made that image, because I wouldn't expect Sony to, like, put Half-Life Alyx on there. Like, that just doesn't read to me like something they would do. Then I get to the PlayStation blog, and I'm like, oh my god, that's a real image. What a burn. That is just... I find in very poor taste, because it's such a... I don't know, it's like almost like a slap in the face, but also them saying, hey, you're not getting this game on PS5. Like, if you want to play Half-Life Alyx, that's how you're doing it. I was like, wow, I can't believe that's a real image. That to me also says they probably did try to get the game to come over, but maybe they just couldn't work something out. Maybe that there were no conversations at all, but you have to imagine they did try to get the game brought over, and maybe Valve was not interested, or maybe they asked for a sum of money that Sony was not willing to fund. I don't know, whatever the case is, it was something where I think the image was like not something you should use. But with that in mind, I'll also say I did not expect this thing to cost money. I don't know, I just immediately thought like, oh, it's going to be like the PSVR1 camera adapter, just give them your serial number and you'll be entitled to one, and that way there's more utility to every single headset out there. But now in hindsight, given the context of our one concern with this headset was that, okay, supporting PC, that's good, but are you really going to support PC? Because the problem with doing that is that it cuts into your bottom line. You're not going to collect any revenue from the software sales on a different storefront. So I think a lot of people are speculating, oh, is it a streaming solution? Are they going to whitelist certain games and do their own storefront, or, partner with certain studios, or, just these kind of, I think, worst case scenarios. But now it's like, okay, well, that's how they'll monetize using it on PC. Sell the adapter. That thought did not cross my mind. So it makes sense, even though the adapter, I think, is kind of a steep asking price. But not supporting all the other things that the headset is well known for is really, I think, a hard sell. So this really is not great news. I would hope that this is simply a matter of Sony wanting to get the adapter news out there while the headset is on discount as part of the Days of Play promotion, and they'll eventually update that PSVR2 application with a number of drivers and updating PSVR2 software so that it will have greater support and playability across all these hardware features that PSVR2 has, because if you take out all of those, this headset looks far less compelling on PC, especially given that it's indirectly more expensive with the adapter costing $60, right? So I would hope that's what they're planning on doing, but if this is really their support, is just the $60 adapter and then it does nothing else, I don't think you're going to sell this to a PC audience. If anything, it maybe adds more utility to current owners, but I don't know. I think just that this news was not at all what I was hoping it would be. It's like a small bump to the utility of PSVR 2, sure. Playing all PC VR games and there's no restrictions, I mean, that's good, but this I just think is not it. There's more I wanted out of this announcement. Now let's get into another new rumor about Microsoft shipping their games on PlayStation platforms, and this one is a bit of a doozy because it's about a very well-known synonymous IP with the Xbox brand, arguably the biggest, that being Halo. So this report comes from Tom Warren, writing for The Verge, as part of their newsletter called Notepad, and it goes over Microsoft's current plans internally as we go into the weekend with the Xbox Game Showcase, which is going to be like 2 hours long, and according to sources familiar with Microsoft's plans, we've got more candidates for Project Latitude, that being the code name for Microsoft shipping games on rival consoles. So more games being considered are Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, Starfield, Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, Age of Mythology, Doom the Dark Ages, which we just discussed a rumor about that, how that game apparently is going to be announced multi-platform, but we're now hearing Microsoft is working on an updated remaster for Halo Combat Evolved, and apparently this too is being considered for PlayStation 5. Which, on the flip side of all this, games like Fable, South of Midnight, and Gear 6 are not being considered for PS5, at least not right now. And there's another angle to this as well, which is Jez Corden, writing for Windows Central, has chimed in, talking about what they've heard and looked into, and from their point of view, Age of Mythology, Avowed, South of Midnight, Hellblade 2, and Starfield are not in active development for PS5. So while they might have been considered, they're not actively coming, at least not right now. So it seems like that's the most up-to-date rumor with this ongoing thing that we're probably going to have for a long time, which is just, well, rumors, right? A lot of hearsay, a lot of telephone game for what is a lot of IP across various studios, a lot of people that are discussing this internally at Microsoft, what should come, what should not come. And there's also various stages of development as well. I mean, port jobs can still take a decent amount of time, anywhere from 6 months to up to a year even, right? A game like Starfield certainly probably would take quite a bit of time if they're planning on shipping that on PlayStation 5, and one would, make the argument that if that game was coming, we would maybe have a more clear-cut answer as to if that game is coming, or at least rumors heavily suggesting that one for sure is coming, because it would be in development for quite a bit. Because if they do plan on shipping games on rival platforms, there's only so much you can do in the consideration stage, I should say, because you still have this timeline to work off of for actually porting the games over, right? So, like if Starfield is going to come, like that has to be in development now to ship in like 2025 even, let's say, right? Unless there's already a lot of progress there from the PlayStation 5 build from when the game was going to be coming to PS5, pre-acquisition, we should say. But yeah, to sort of, I guess, boil this thing down, we're just going to keep getting these kind of rumors for the foreseeable future. I mean, clearly Microsoft has no direct answer on how they're going to handle all this IP and all these games. Maybe the one safe thing we can say is that Activision and maybe also Bethesda for new upcoming releases, Doom being a good example here, those will stay multi-platform, but then anything that's more under the proper Xbox Game Studios umbrella, they might be a bit more selective. And certainly we could probably bank on them still, shipping first on their platforms and then seeing a 2-year delay if they do intend on shipping on PlayStation or Nintendo. It's going to be an interesting showcase for sure, looking at all these games and people just wondering, okay, is that going to come? Is this not going to come? We're not going to get those answers, not anytime soon at least. Next up, it is officially past June 1st, and that means effective on June 1st was Herman Hulst and Hideaki Nishino taking on their new CEO roles of the Studios Business Group and the Platform Business Group. So they actually published this open statement on the SIE blog where it was an email sent out to all SIE employees. So the part that was notable here that we're going to go over, they say, and I quote here, "While having two CEOs is a new structure for SIE, we know this will foster greater creativity and innovation as we look for new ways to grow the business, always keeping our community at the forefront. Two distinct business groups will enable us to have more rigor and clarity across our lines of business as SIE continues to grow and evolve. As we step into our new roles, we will take time to deepen our understanding about various aspects of the business. In the coming weeks, you will receive information about a future town hall, and moving forward, we plan to communicate with you regularly." Yeah, that's something Jim Ryan did as well. I know communication for him was on this frequent basis, and at least from people I've always talked to at SIE, that was something they always enjoyed about Jim Ryan, so I guess they're trying to maybe keep up with that same sort of dialogue and doing these regular town halls and things like that. But this very much does usher in a new generation for Sony Interactive Entertainment, where on the surface, I still don't expect things to really change all that much, given these are two people that were already in the company doing the same thing, but we can get a much better picture of what PlayStation will look like in 5-10 years, knowing that they've been with the organization as long as they have, and we can't attribute these changes to that sort of turnover that we often see every 7 to 12 years or something, right? So we know that it's very much been them the whole way through, and let's hope it paints a much brighter future for PlayStation and those that work at the company and make everything possible. Moving on to some new details for The Last of Us HBO Season 2, courtesy of Deadline, where they were speaking with Neil Druckmann and also Craig Mazin. We now know Season 2 is going to be 7 episodes long, slightly under Season 1, where that was 9 episodes, although it was supposed to be 10 originally, and that got bumped down simply because one episode ended up being fairly long, about an hour and a half, that being Episode 1. And so what's being explained here is that that's a similar thing for Season 2. One episode is already getting quite long, about an hour and 30 minutes, possibly a bit longer, and Craig also explained that most episodes are certainly hitting that near hour mark, and they also talked about how for Part 2's story, they were basically trying to map this out because they knew Part 2 was going to be multiple seasons, so they were trying to find natural breakpoints for where a season would end, and they just came to a more natural conclusion that Season 2 is going to end on Episode 7, which is fair enough. I thought for sure this was a matter of, Season 2 doing well, so now HBO has more confidence to order a boatload more episodes going into Season 2 and 3, which technically Season 3 has not been signed just yet. So that is something that Craig also mentions, but he is apparently very confident that not only will that go ahead, but Season 3 is going to be much bigger, and there might even be a 4th season as well, which I would assume they've already filmed a bunch of things for Season 3 and possibly 4. I feel like they're probably just filming a bunch of things, just trying to get everything for what they need in that moment for whatever Part 2's story is calling in that moment. You know what I mean? So in a way, I almost feel like he absolutely knows 100% that Season 3 is a go, and we also know for sure we're doing a 4th season, and they just can't say anything just yet. I don't know. I mean, I'm not that privy to what goes on with the TV and film business. It's certainly much different than games, but I would assume that's kind of what's playing out here, and that also means, well, it depends on what they're planning on changing for the Part 2 story, right? How many liberties are they going to take with how Part 2 story naturally is unfolding, right? So there's, I think, a few places they could actually end off on that 7th episode, but no point in speculating right now. I guess we'll just wait till we get more info and possibly a first trailer. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X, and if you'd like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so simple. Follow the link down below, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are some of the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and our Tuesday video was looking into why PS5 is so successful without true exclusives, or at least not a ton of them, games that are only on PS5, not PS4 or PC. I've really wanted to dive into that topic for a long time, so happy to finally do it. Go check that one out. And then, Summer Games Fest later today, so we might do a separate evening conversation later in the night, depending on what does or doesn't happen for Sony. And that, I think, is pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.